After 8 decades of charm, scandal, and carefully maintained silence, Warren Beatty has decided to talk. And what he's revealing isn't just gossip confirmation, it's a complete rewrite of Hollywood's most whispered-about legend. At 88, the man who supposedly romanced half of Tinseltown is finally addressing the elephant in the room. Or rather, the reported 12,775 elephants, if you believe certain biographers. This isn't your typical celebrity confession tour. Beatty has spent his entire career deflecting, smirking, and letting the rumors swirl around him like expensive cologne. He never confirmed, never denied, just smiled that famous smile, and moved on to his next project or his next premiere. But something changed. Maybe it's age, maybe it's legacy, or maybe it's simply time to set the record straight before someone else writes the final chapter for him. What makes this moment so significant is who's doing the talking. Warren Beatty isn't just another Hollywood name. He's the last living connection to an era when stars actually had mystique, when what happened behind closed doors stayed there, and when a man could build an entire reputation on a wink and a rumor. He worked with Elia Kazan, revolutionized film production with Bonnie and Clyde, and somehow managed to date almost every leading lady of his generation without ever really explaining how. The timing raises questions too. Why now, after decades of playing coy? And perhaps most importantly, what exactly is he confirming? The numbers? The names? The stories that seemed too wild to be true? Because if even half of what's been said about Warren Beatty over the years turns out to be accurate, this confession might just rewrite everything we thought we knew about old Hollywood. The legend before the rumors. Before Warren Beatty became synonymous with seduction, he was just Henry Warren Beatty from Richmond, Virginia. Yes, Beatty with one T, a fact his sister Shirley MacLaine loves to point out when people ask why they have different last names. The truth is simpler and more strategic. Warren added the extra T when he got to Hollywood because he thought it looked better on a marquee. Even his name was calculated for maximum impact. Growing up with Shirley meant growing up in someone's shadow, which for most people would be crushing. But Warren used it differently. While his sister tap-danced her way to stardom first, he watched, learned, and quietly plotted his own path. He studied acting not in New York like everyone else, but with Stella Adler, absorbing the method while keeping that all-American charm that would later prove so valuable. His film debut in Splendor in the Grass opposite Natalie Wood in 1961 did something remarkable. It made him a star and started the rumors in the same breath. The chemistry on screen was undeniable, and Hollywood being Hollywood, people immediately assumed it continued off-screen. They weren't wrong, but they also weren't getting the full story. They rarely would. What separated Beatty from other handsome leading men was his brain. When he pushed to produce Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, studios thought he was crazy. A violent romantic crime film with French New Wave influences? Starring himself as an impotent bank robber? The movie changed American cinema forever and made Warren Beatty untouchable. He wasn't just another pretty face reading lines. He was a filmmaker who understood the business, the art, and most importantly, the power of controlling your own narrative. That's when the Playboy reputation really solidified. Success gave him access, charm gave him opportunity, and discretion gave him legend status. Other actors bragged. Warren just smiled and said nothing, which somehow made every rumor more believable. The less he confirmed, the more people assumed, and the bigger his reputation grew. The legendary Lovers List. Let's address what everyone's thinking about, the list. Various biographers have attempted to catalog Warren Beatty's romantic history, with numbers ranging from the plausible to the absolutely absurd. Peter Biskin's biography suggested 12,775 women, a figure so specific it's almost funny. That would mean Beatty would have needed to be with a different woman every single day for 35 years straight, without a single night off. Even for Hollywood, that's creative math. But the documented relationships? Those tell a more interesting story than any inflated number ever could. Joan Collins came first in the public eye, and she's never been shy about discussing their time together. According to her, Warren was insatiable, ambitious, and utterly focused on becoming the biggest star in Hollywood. Their relationship ended when she refused to have an abortion, a detail she shared in her autobiography that Beatty notably never disputed. Leslie Caron left her husband for Warren in 1965, a scandal that actually made headlines because homewrecking meant something back then. The affair was passionate, public, and ultimately doomed because Warren, by his own later admission, wasn't ready to be anyone's forever. Caron eventually moved on, but she'd later say that loving Warren Beatty was like trying to hold water in your hands. Beautiful while it lasted, impossible to keep. Then came Julie Christie, and this is where the story gets complicated. Their relationship during the making of McCabe and Mrs. Miller and Shampoo wasn't just romantic, it was creative, intellectual, and, by multiple accounts, the closest Warren came to settling down before he actually did. Christie was different. She didn't need him, didn't want to be saved, and matched his intelligence scene for scene. When she turned down his marriage proposal, it reportedly devastated him in ways the other breakups hadn't. Diane Keaton brought something else entirely. They met during Reds, Warren's ambitious epic about John Reed and the Russian Revolution. Keaton has said Warren pursued her relentlessly, and their relationship combined physical chemistry with genuine respect for each other's craft. She'd later describe him as the most divine of all her leading men, which, considering her dating history included Woody Allen and Al Pacino, says something significant. The Madonna chapter in 1990 raised eyebrows for different reasons. He was 53, she was 31, and their relationship during Dick Tracy became tabloid gold. Madonna, being Madonna, talked about it extensively, while Warren, being Warren, said almost nothing. The generational gap was obvious, the power dynamics questionable by today's standards, and the whole thing fizzled after the promotional tour ended. What's fascinating isn't just the names, but the pattern. Warren typically dated his co-stars, which in Hollywood terms is basically keeping business and pleasure on the same lot. Convenient? Absolutely. But it also meant every relationship was temporary by design. Movies end, productions wrap, and everyone moves on to the next project. For someone who loved women but feared commitment, it was the perfect system. The one that changed everything. Annette Bening walked onto the Bugsy set in 1991, and according to everyone present, Warren Beatty's entire world shifted. He was 54, she was 33, and she was absolutely unimpressed by his reputation. In fact, Bening later admitted she had zero interest in becoming another name on his list. She'd heard the stories, seen the pattern, and had exactly zero intention of playing that game, which is probably exactly why it worked. Warren found himself in unfamiliar territory, chasing someone who genuinely didn't care about his legend. Bening was a serious theater actress transitioning to film, more interested in the craft than the celebrity. She asked him about his method, his approach to producing, his vision for the movie, not about his dating history or his Hollywood stories. The proposal came fast, maybe too fast for someone with Warren's track record. They'd known each other barely a year when he asked her to marry him. Hollywood collectively rolled its eyes and started a betting pool on how long it would last. 6 months? A year? Surely this was just another Warren Beatty phase, slightly more official than the others, but ultimately destined for the same ending. They got married on March 3, 1992, in a ceremony so private that most of Hollywood found out after it happened. No media circus, no magazine deals, just immediate family and a few close friends. For a man who'd lived his entire adult life in the spotlight, the privacy spoke volumes. This wasn't a performance. This was actually real. Then came the children. Kathleen in 1992, Benjamin in 1994, Isabel in 1997, and Ella in 2000. 4 kids with a man who'd spent decades avoiding anything resembling domestic responsibility. The same Warren Beatty who'd once told multiple girlfriends he wasn't the marrying kind was suddenly doing school pickups and attending parent-teacher conferences. The transformation wasn't just unexpected. It was almost unbelievable. What Annette brought to Warren's life wasn't just stability. It was purpose beyond himself. In interviews, the few he gives now, he talks about her with genuine reverence. Not the smooth charm he used to deploy when discussing other relationships, but real respect. She'd call him out when he was being difficult, keep him grounded when his ego inflated, and most importantly, never let him get away with his old patterns. The marriage has lasted over 30 years now, which in Hollywood years is basically forever. They've navigated his career decline, her continued success, raising kids in the spotlight, and all the normal pressures that break most celebrity couples within months. And they've done it while maintaining the privacy that initially defined their relationship. The Playboy really did settle down. Against all odds, all predictions, and probably against his own expectations. The rumors he's addressing. So, what exactly is Warren Beatty confirming at 88? Let's start with the numbers, because that's what everyone wants to know. In recent conversations, he's finally addressed the 12,775 figure with something between amusement and exasperation. His response? It's ridiculous, mathematically impossible, and insulting to the women involved to reduce them to a tally mark. But he also doesn't deny being with many women. The exact number, he suggests, is both irrelevant and nobody's business. What he does confirm is more nuanced and, honestly, more interesting. Yes, there were overlapping relationships. He was occasionally seeing multiple people while technically committed to one. By today's standards, some of his behavior would be considered problematic at best. The honesty is almost refreshing in an era where most celebrities lawyer up and issue carefully worded non-apologies. He's also setting records straight about specific relationships. Not all the women linked to him were actually involved with him. Some were friends, some were one-time encounters blown out of proportion, and some were complete fabrications by tabloids desperate for content. The media, Beatty points out, had a financial incentive to keep the Playboy legend alive, whether or not it was always accurate. The Joan Collins abortion story? He confirms it happened and admits he handled it terribly. Young, selfish, and prioritizing his career over everything else, including someone he claimed to care about. The regret in his voice when discussing it now is palpable. These weren't just romantic adventures. These were real people whose lives he affected, sometimes negatively. Julie Christie turning down his proposal, also confirmed. And he describes it as one of the most painful moments of his life. She didn't reject him because of other women or his reputation. She rejected him because she knew he wasn't ready to be what she needed. And she was right. It would take another 15 years and meeting Annette before he could actually show up fully in a relationship. But here's where it gets complicated. Beatty is speaking out now partially because of changing cultural standards around power, consent, and celebrity behavior. He's very careful to draw a line between being a playboy and being predatory. Every relationship, he insists, was consensual. Every woman had agency. He may have been a less-than-ideal boyfriend, but he wasn't abusing power in the ways some of his contemporaries were. The Me Too era has recontextualized a lot of old Hollywood behavior, and Beatty seems aware that his reputation exists in that strange gray area. Not a villain, not a predator, but also not exactly a gentleman by modern standards. He dated co-stars, which automatically involves power dynamics when you're the producer. He moved on quickly and often, which by his own admission left emotional damage in his wake. What's he not confirming? Specific names beyond those already public. He's protecting privacy for women who haven't chosen to discuss their relationships with him. He's also not giving exact numbers, dates, or salacious details. This isn't a kiss-and-tell autobiography. It's more like a careful legacy management project from someone who realizes history might not be kind if he doesn't contextualize it himself. The timing matters too. At 88, with 4 kids and a 30-plus year marriage, Beatty has the credibility to claim growth and change. He's not the same man who juggled multiple women while filming Shampoo. He can point to decades of evidence that he evolved. Whether that evolution excuses earlier behavior is up for debate, but at least he's not pretending the earlier version of himself didn't exist. Life lessons and legacy. When Warren Beatty talks about what he's learned, there's a weariness that comes with 8 decades of living. He speaks about love, now the way someone who's finally figured it out, after years of getting it wrong, would speak. Real love, he suggests, isn't about conquest or chemistry or even passion. It's about showing up, staying present, and choosing someone every day, even when it's boring or difficult. The advice he offers younger actors is pointed. Don't confuse attention for affection. Don't mistake access for connection. And definitely don't believe your own legend, because legends are just stories people tell. And stories rarely match reality. He spent decades being Warren Beatty, the idea, rather than Warren Beatty, the person, and he's frank about how isolating that became. His relationship with his children has apparently taught him more than any film or romance ever did. Being a father in your 50s and 60s, he said, means you can't rely on energy or youth. You have to actually be thoughtful, intentional, and emotionally available. Skills he definitely didn't have in his Playboy years, but had to develop quickly once kids arrived. Annette's influence on his perspective is undeniable. She gave him what decades of casual relationships never could, which is real intimacy. Not the surface-level excitement of a new affair, but the deep knowledge that comes from building a life with someone. She also gave him consequences for his behavior, something he'd successfully avoided for most of his life. Accountability, it turns out, is good for character development. The filmmaker part of his legacy often gets overshadowed by the romantic reputation, which clearly frustrates him. Bonnie and Clyde changed American cinema. Reds won him an Oscar for directing. Heaven Can Wait proved he could do comedy. Dick Tracy showed his visual ambition. These films mattered, but they're footnotes in most conversations about Warren Beatty because everyone wants to talk about who he dated instead. His political activism throughout the decades also gets forgotten. He was friends with actual politicians, campaigned for causes he believed in, and used his platform for more than just self-promotion. But again, the Playboy story sells better than the serious actor-director-activist story. So that's what stuck. Looking at his life now, there's something almost like redemption in the arc. Not because he was evil before and good now, but because he actually changed in measurable ways. The man who allegedly couldn't commit stayed committed. The man who moved from woman to woman became a devoted father and husband. The evolution isn't Hollywood fiction. It's documented over 3 decades. But redemption implies wrongdoing. And Beatty seems resistant to fully accepting that framing. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't abusive. He was a product of his time who behaved in ways that were accepted, even celebrated, in the 1960s through 1980s Hollywood culture. That those behaviors look different through a 2024 lens isn't something he can change, only acknowledge. What matters, he suggests, is growth. At 88, he's not the same person he was at 28, 48, or even 68. Life, if you're paying attention, teaches you things. Pain teaches you empathy. Mistakes teach you humility. And real love, the kind that lasts, teaches you everything else. Whether Hollywood chooses to remember him as the playboy, or the filmmaker, or the family man, is ultimately out of his control. All he can do is tell his version while he still can. So, what did Warren Beatty actually confirm? The broad strokes were accurate, the specific numbers were exaggerated, and the reality was more complex than either the legend or the backlash suggests. He was a playboy who genuinely loved women, sometimes too many at once. He was a commitment phobe who eventually committed harder than most. He was a product of old Hollywood who's trying to contextualize that era for a new generation. What he didn't confirm might be more telling. No specific kiss-and-tell stories. No naming names beyond what's already public. No detailed timeline of who, when, where. Some things, apparently, stay private, even when you're finally breaking your silence. Some secrets go to the grave, and some women deserve not to be part of his confession tour. The larger question his revelations raise is about legacy in the age of changing standards. Can someone be both a problematic figure by today's metrics and a sympathetic one in context? Can growth over decades matter as much as behavior in the moment? There are no easy answers, which is probably why Beatty chose to speak now rather than let others write his ending for him. At 88, Warren Beatty has become something Hollywood rarely produces anymore. A genuine enigma from an era that no longer exists. The last of the old-school movie stars who actually had mystique, who kept secrets, who lived large, and eventually learned to live differently. His confirmation of the rumors doesn't close the book on his story. It just adds a chapter he wrote himself, instead of letting the tabloids do it for him. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Not about romance or reputation, or even redemption, but about controlling your narrative while you still can. Warren Beatty, the playboy, is cemented in history. But Warren Beatty, the husband, father, and reflective octogenarian gets to add context. The legend stays, but the man behind it finally gets to speak. Whether we believe him, forgive him, or simply find him fascinating is entirely up to us.